and singing. So we see that the Rebbe understood, and the Rebbe was telling us that one way to overcome any obstacle, any challenge, is with joy. So let's talk about this for a moment. Where does this idea of joy come from? And there's a statement that is known, and that the Hasidic people, from the times of the Baal Shem Tov, when he first founded the Hasidic movement, they weren't called Hasidim. They were called actually the Freiliche, the happy ones, the joyous ones. Why? Because Baal Shem Tov came up with this new philosophy, and that was that a person should be joyous at all times. This idea is actually a new phenomenon, because although King David writes in the book of Psalms that Ividu es Hashem esimcha, a person should serve God with joy. So the idea of serving God with joy, of doing mitzvahs with joy, is not a new thing. So why were the Hasidim called the happy ones? This is something that has been done already before. And the answer is because Baal Shem Tov said that this idea of being joyous should not be limited to certain times, but it has to be a constant. In everything that you do, when you're eating, when you're drinking, when you're sleeping, when you're traveling, when you're at work, a person should be happy. A person should be joyous. The question is why? What benefit is there to being joyous at all times? Maybe a certain time a person should be sad, right? And so we have to understand, what was the Baal Shem Tov teaching us? Why was it so important to have this constant joy? In other words, what benefit is there to society or to myself to be happy all the time? Why is this an important ingredient to how we live our life? And so the first reason the Baal Shem Tov gave, the founder of the Hasidic movement, tells us that when a person is joyous, it actually impacts their spiritual well-being. Think about it for yourself. If you're sad, how do you pull yourself out of that sadness? One way to do it is to start to smile. Start smiling. I'm telling you, if you start to smile, you'll see you will begin to get happier. Another way is to play a lively song, or a happy song, a joyous song. That will also make you happy. Now, one may interpret this to be just external joy or fake joy. But we know, and we discussed this a little bit last week, that when a person behaves in a certain manner, it also impacts truly the way they feel. As we said, fake it till you make it. So make as if you're happy, and you will see that you will become happier. Because our internal DNA, our internal clock is to be happy. The biggest proof is that when we're not happy, we go to the doctor to pull us out of it. Because we know that's not what I'm supposed to be. I know I'm supposed to be happy. And so the question is, how can I make sure that I'm always happy, always joyous? That's the key. And so joy brings more joy. Sadness brings more sadness. When a person is happy, what does it mean it brings more joy? Joy brings a greater degree of joy. In other words, when I'm happy, I also tap into joyous blessings, joyous energies, joyous things. So when I'm happy, I'm actually bringing down joyous things. Let's expand upon this. I'm going to say an interesting story, which we have to understand the story, and so we'll try to dissect the story. The story is with the second Chabad Rebbe. His name was the Mittler Rebbe. Mittler Rebbe had a choir as part of his songs, a part of his service, part of the Farbrengens, the gatherings that he had. So he had a choir. In addition to the choir, he also had show horses. That's what they're called. He had a group of show horses that his Hasidim, in the long black coats and white shirts, would get onto these horses and would put on a show. And this is all part of a certain way he served God, utilizing God's world that we live in, nature that we have. And so at one specific day, it was the middle of the week, there was no holiday, it was no special occasion, but he invited the choir to come sing, and he invited the horsemen to come and to perform with their show horses and to put up a big performance. Okay? And so the choir started to sing and the show horses started to show. And one of the horsemen, one of the people that were on the show horses was his son by the name of Nachum. And so they started to sing, and as the choir was going on, there was also musicians that were there, getting more joyous. The horses were running around, jumping up and down, and something happened, and the Mittler Rebbe's son, Nachum, who was on one of the horses, all of a sudden flew off the horse, landed, and he seemed like he was pretty badly hurt. And so, of course, everyone froze, and the Mittler Rebbe was standing and watching this whole show. And the Mittler Rebbe motioned to them to continue the singing and continue the dancing and have the doctors examine his son. And so they finished their show, they finished their singing and music, and they came to the Mittler Rebbe, and they asked the Mittler Rebbe, what should we do now? So he said, what's with my son? And they said that the situation is not as serious as they thought it was. He only broke his leg. So the Mittler Rebbe said, thank you very much. But he asked the Hasidim, he says, why are you not asking me why I set up this whole to-do on a regular Tuesday afternoon in the middle of the week? Aren't you surprised that we call this whole thing? They said, yeah, why did you do it? So Mittler Rebbe said that I saw in heaven that there was a terrible decree that was supposed to happen to my son Nachum. And I couldn't figure out how I could nullify this decree. And I realized that if I increase in joy, this will nullify the decree. But I saw that it could only nullify a certain amount of the decree, not the whole decree. And so therefore, when my son fell off the horse, I realized this must be the part of the decree that I was not able to nullify through the joy. So all that happened to him, instead of a severe judgment against him, all that happened to him was he broke his leg. In other words, the Mittler Rebbe was telling us that even though there's a terrible decree that happened, or that was supposed to happen, through joy, we could nullify that decree. We can break that bad thing that's supposed to happen, and the joy can actually turn things around. You may ask, well, he broke his leg, and that's a terrible thing. That's true. But if we knew what could have happened, then we recognize breaking a leg is not so bad. So what happened was essentially the joy is what changed the course of the results or the outcome of what was supposed to happen to Nachum. And that's the point, that if we understand the spiritual power that our joy could accomplish, we will always be happy. We will always walk around with a smile. The Kotzker Rebbe once said that what's worse about a sin is the bad feeling that we have after we did the transgression. Because sometimes we may do a transgression and we hopefully regret it and move on. But sometimes we get depressed over it. We feel bad. Why did I do it? And we get more and more down. And that just leads us to depression, which leads us to performing less of God's wishes. So sometimes the bad feeling we have after the sin is worse than the sin itself, because that drags us down even further. In other words, our default should be being joyous, being happy, not allowing the hard feelings, the depressive thoughts take over how we function. And more importantly, we cannot let it freeze us up as it sometimes does. We have to be more fluid. And joy allows us to flow, allows us to be more fluid and to go with the flow and to be able to accomplish much more. But joy is not an easy thing to do. And the question is, how can I be joyous? Or more importantly, how can I cause myself to be happy? And so there's a story that is told that one time there was a chassid that came into the Rebbe and he had a very negative disposition. And so the Rebbe took out a book from a shelf. It was a book of the Zohar, the Kabbalistic book, and he opened up the book and the chassid saw it says in there the words, "Come and observe." Okay? And he says that our world is always ready to receive the spiritual flow that emanates from above. This is what it says in the Zohar. And we're always ready to receive that flow that's coming down. The upper world provides in accordance with the state below. For example, if you want to have a cup or a drink of 8 ounces of water, you only take a 6-ounce cup and put it underneath the faucet, you're only going to get 6 ounces. You're not going to get 8 ounces. So depending on the vessel that you make for yourself, that's what kind of blessing is going to come from above. Okay? So the showering from above is dependent on the state below, the state of how we are. So if the state below, in other words, if we are joyous, then correspondingly the abundance flow from above will also come in a state of joy, in a state of happiness. When we get something from our friend, do we want to get it begrudgingly? Do we want to get it happily? So if we're smiling when we're receiving something, I can almost guarantee you the person giving it to us will also put on a smile. That is the same way it works from above also. When we are looking to receive the blessing, the abundance from above, when we are making the joyous vessel, we're going to get it also in a joyous fashion. Therefore, said the Rebbe, serve God with joy, because human joy and optimism draws a corresponding joy from above. And this is why our sages tell us that the joy cannot just be at certain times. And this is what the Baal Shem Tov introduced. Of course, people were always happy. But the Baal Shem Tov introduced that happiness should not be reserved for certain times of the day. In fact, self-reflection is what should be reserved for certain times of the day. It's okay to get sad over our sorry state or the things that we didn't do correctly. But reserve that for a certain time of day. The rest of the day, we have to be happy. Up until the Baal Shem Tov, people thought the opposite. Always be sad, and only certain times be happy. Baal Shem Tov said, no, always be happy, and certain times be sad. But Baal Shem Tov also took it a step further, and it says, Simcha Peiretz Geder. When a person is happy, it breaks through boundaries. It breaks through limitations. I've seen it so many times. In a moment when you're feeling down, but you need to accomplish something. You need to make a phone call that you don't want to make. Break out in a joyous song and then make the phone call. The gates will open up. It's amazing. It's amazing how many boundaries we can break down through joy. King David was sitting in prison and he started to dance. People thought he was a madman. You know what that did? They freed him from prison. They said, we don't want a crazy man in our prison. So literally, when we are joyous, we literally break down boundaries, break down limitations, break down walls. And this is why it says, Simcha Peiretz Geder. through joy, we will also be able to usher in the ultimate redemption with the coming of Mashiach. You think Mashiach wants to come to a sad state? Wants to come to a joyous state? By the way, today what's going on in the world, in a way, it's an unbelievable sign of energy. It's great energy. The only question is how we can redirect it into a positive place. The energy is great. The coming together for a common cause is great. Singing, dancing, running, whatever it is, cheering, these are all great things. But if only it can be channeled in the right place. And so we have to recognize this idea of being joyous, but joyous, of course, in the right manner. And so to summarize, joy, even unrelated to the type of religious practice, just being happy, is not discouraged or forbidden. Even merely tolerated and allowed, it's highly encouraged and it's considered sacred in and of itself. If you're not happy, I don't know, listen to a comedian. Now, comedians are a little tricky because how does the saying go? There's some like good jokes and dirty jokes. I forget exactly how it goes, but basically comedians think that the only way you make a good joke is if it's a foul joke. And so, but the truth is today you have really clean, good comedian, but a good comedy can make someone happy, and that's a good thing. Because that ultimately will open us up to greater joy, to true spiritual joy. So joy is not only holy, it's highly effective. And is the most powerful tool to break the barriers of harsh decrees and divine judgment, both personal and collective. And our mindset, whether expansive or narrow, determines whether the state and flow of divine energy will be correspondingly forthcoming or restrictive. So if we open up and we're in an expansive state of mind through joy, it says the Rabbah would begin his class with a joke. The great sage would start his class with a joke. Right? Many of my are in the synagogue. A lot of the talks I give, I try to start with the joke. Why? Because the joke opens up our minds, makes us happy, and that's the idea of joy. And this brings us to the next point. We'll start with a little joke. Look what it says over here on the screen. Obviously, this is a humorous, comedic statement. Has no truth in it whatsoever, except for the fact that we should definitely not judge another person. That is true, right? And so, let's read together the Mishnah in Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 1, Mishnah 6. Mishnah goes like this. Oh, wrong one, right here. Okay. Expand it a little bigger. Okay, can you see? Oh, a little too big. There we go. Oh. There we go. There we go. Okay. All right, Mishnah 6. Yeshua, the son of Parachia, and Nittai, the Arbalite, received the oral tradition from them. And they said like this, 3 things. Yeshua and Parachia used to say, appoint for yourself a teacher and acquire for yourself a companion, a friend, and judge all men with the scale weighed in his favor. Judge all men favorably, or judge every person to the side of merit. Okay? This is the Mishnah. Let's expound upon the Mishnah. He says 3 things. The first one is looking upwards, find yourself a teacher. Second one is looking straight, acquire for yourself a friend. And the third one is looking at someone that may seem inferior to you, judge them favorably. What is the Mishnah telling us? The Mishnah is telling us three very important teachings. Let's start with one at a time. The first one is, make yourself a teacher. Just three Hebrew words that can almost, I believe, can literally redirect a person's life and propel a person to greatness. Get a mentor. Get a teacher. Make for yourself a teacher. Someone who will guide you and show you the proper path. Now, what does this mean, make for yourself a teacher? One may think it's a simple statement. Easy, right? But the truth is, it's not so easy. Why not? So let's explore this for a second. Judaism is a big proponent on people self-educating themselves. We believe that a person should go to the library, take a book, and learn. A person should always learn, always grow. I wonder what the same Judaism would say about Google or learning from Google. But either way, the idea of education is a major emphasis in Jewish teaching, a Jewish way of life. Even self-teaching is a big part. However, Judaism also says and recognizes that there's a limitation on self-teaching. There's only so much that books can teach you. Can give us a lot of data, a lot of knowledge, but they don't tell us how to apply the information to a specific case that we're dealing with. In fact, if we're going through something and we went to our teacher for guidance and our teacher gave me guidance, then my friend was going through the same thing, and I told my friend what my teacher said, it's not going to be as effective unless they go to the teacher themselves. Why not? I'm saying exactly the same words. Because education is not just about passing on information, it is about helping the person apply it to their specific scenario, their specific case, their specific time or way of life. Every situation is unique. Not only unique, every situation has so many nuances. So the Mishnah says, find yourself a teacher. Meaning to say, find the teacher that knows you, that understands you. Find a mentor that cares about you, that knows your strengths and your weaknesses. That is someone who will be able to truly help you. It's not just enough to sign up for a class, anywhere, whatever, or on YouTube and watch a YouTube tutorial. Those are all very nice and very helpful. But we need a answer to a certain thing we're going through, and we have a personal teacher that can help us and guide us. That is what the Mishnah is saying, make for yourself a teacher. I'm going to read for you a story that goes like this. A man brought a gift of the first fleece to Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. Rabbi Yishmael asked him, he says, he brought him when a person has produce that grows, so the first produce has to be brought to the priest. And so he traveled to the city of Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, who was a priest, and he brought him his gift. So he says, I don't understand. From your city until here, there's no other priest that you could have given this to? So the man said, I'll tell you the truth. I have a question that I wanted to ask you. And so I figured I'm ready coming to you. I'll bring you the gift of the first first of the produce, the first fruits. So Shmuel ben Elisha said, I can't be the judge on your question. Here are two other judges, let them listen to your case. I can't be the judge. And I also can't accept your gift. Why not? And so Shmuel said that when the man brought his case in front of these two other judges, he was sitting and listening. And every time the man spoke, Rabbi Shmuel was thinking, the man should say this, the guy should say this. And he said to himself, you see how bad taking a bribe is? Even though I didn't take the bribe and I recused myself from this case because the guy offered the bribe to me, but even so, I was still finding a favor that this guy was saying. In other words, he said that when we want to get an answer from someone, it has to come from a healthy place. It can't come, we can't bring a bribe almost to a teacher and then come with our question to the teacher, because the teacher, just like ourselves, a person, why does a person need a teacher? Right? Why do we need to have a mentor? Do we not know everything ourselves? Do we not know what's best for ourselves? The answer is that it's very hard for us to be objective on our own selves. We're too biased. And so sometimes we need an outside opinion to be honest with us. But if this outside opinion is also going to be biased because they received a bribe or a gift, then they can either be a proper judge of character or tell me if I'm doing something right or wrong. The story goes that one friend should never judge another friend. Both friends should judge others together. Just a joke. So the point is that we cannot be a proper judge for ourselves. And a teacher that is paid off can't be a proper judge for ourselves either. We need someone who's objective. This is why the Mishnah uses the word, make for yourself a teacher. Make for yourself, impose upon yourself. It may not be what you want. It may not be comfortable, and it may not be easy. But you have to work on yourself to have the proper teacher that can be unbiased and tell you this thing the way it is. Because how often do we come to someone really not wanting to hear the way it really is? But this is what the Mishnah says. Appoint someone. We have to choose someone who's going to be unbiased and tell us the way it is. Okay? The next thing the Mishnah says, acquire for yourself a friend. By the way, this is a very powerful statement. What does it mean, acquire for yourself a friend? To have a true friend means that you have to pay for it. Not pay the bill at the bar every time. No, that's not what it means. In college, we always want to be friendly with the rich kid because they always cover the tabs. That's not what it means, acquiring a friend. Acquiring a friend means we have to be prepared that it's going to cost us. It's going to cost us emotional space. It's going to cost us vulnerability because now our friend knows our vulnerable spots. But that's what it means. Acquiring our friend means putting ourselves in a position where it costs us. Rabbi Chanina used to say, I've learned a lot from my teachers. I learned more from my colleagues. And from my students, I learned the most. But you see that from a colleague, from a friend, we can learn much more even than from a teacher. Because a friend can teach us a lot. Strength of character, emotional strength. Think about the times we're living in right now. If we have an honest friend, they'll tell us, don't go into that place. Don't do the things you shouldn't do. A proper friend will hold our hand and make sure we don't do that. And this is why it says, purchase for yourself a friend. Literally, you have to buy yourself a friend. There's a story that is told, an interesting story, that Choni Hamagal means Choni the circle drawer. He got this nickname of being the circle drawer because one time there was a drought in the land of Israel, and everyone came to Rabbi Choni, said, please ask God to send rain. He was a holy man. So he drew a circle around himself, and he told God, and he went into the circle and said, I'm not leaving the circle until rain falls in the land of Israel. And the rain started to pour down, thunderstorms. So Choni said, God, this rain is going to destroy all the fields. It's not a good rain of blessing. It's the thunderstorms. So God sent a drizzle. So Choni said, God, a drizzle is not going to do anything. Send a normal rain, which God eventually did. The rabbis rebuked Choni for being so particular with his requests from God. But either way, Choni got this nickname, Choni, the circle drawer, because he was obviously a holy man, a miracle worker. And God listened to what he had to say. It says that Choni once went to sleep. He planted in Yiddish, it's called a buxer tree, a cabbage tree. A cabbage tree takes, carob, C-A-R-O-B. Carob tree takes 70 years to grow. And so someone saw that he was planting it. So he said, Choni, what are you planting it for? You're not going to be alive when it's finally grown. He says, my grandchildren will enjoy it. They said, but you're not going to enjoy it. So Choni said, maybe I will. And so, in fact, what happened was Choni fell asleep. And it says that he slept and he woke up 70 years later next to this carob tree. He woke up and it's a new world. Imagine going to sleep, waking up 70 years later. Will not recognize the world we live in. Forget about it. Anyway, I know people that are unfortunately have gone to prison for 20 years. They come out. It's a different world. Imagine 70 years. So anyway, he woke up and he went to his house and he saw this, he asked for his son. They said, oh, this guy died. He said, who are these kids? They said, oh, this is this guy's son. So he says, oh, it's my grandchildren then. I'm Choni. They started to make fun of him. He said, what are you, crazy, you old man? Get out of here. Who are you? You don't know who you are. So he went to the study hall. And he heard that they were talking in the teaching. They was talking about the teachings that Choni said. They were talking about him with such great admiration. So he says, oh, that's me you're talking about. They said, you. Yeah. Another, go tell your Baba Meister your stories to somebody else. And so Choni turned around to God and he realized that no one recognizes him. And he doesn't have any friends that are alive anymore. So he asked God, he says, what worth is it to be alive anymore? And he lay down, he went to sleep, and he didn't wake up. So this is what the Talmud says, this story. The point of the story is to bring out the importance of having a friend. A colleague is someone we can talk it over with. Because Choni said, what worth is it for me to be alive? I have no friends. Sometimes a life alone is worse than a life, is not worth it, not worth living. It's not worth living. So therefore, the Mishnah says, acquire for yourself a friend, no matter what cost it is. You should have a friend. And it's something I learned today, interesting comment, that the word for kinei, to acquire, purchase for yourself a friend, kinei also means like a feather or a quill or a pen. Okay? Kinei. And it says sometimes a friend can be your pen. When you write things down, that can be your best friend. This is why parents encourage kids to write a diary. So there's a diary, just getting the words out, saying it or putting it down on paper can be very therapeutic and very helpful. Of course, ultimately it should be a friend of flesh and blood, but this is also one state of being. Finally, we have the next statement that the Mishnah says, and that is, don't judge another person or judge a person favorably, is really what the Mishnah says. Find favor. Because actually, the common statement is don't judge someone till you're in their shoes, because you can never know what life they went through. That's one statement, but the Mishnah is actually saying a little bit different. And the Mishnah is saying, to judge everybody favorably. Because one could come to think and say, how can I judge anybody even favorably? I don't know what they went through or what they're going through. The Mishnah says, no. There's nothing wrong to find a nice thing about another person. There's an amazing story. I was telling this to my wife today, that there was a guy who went to work for an employer. And at the end of the year of his contract with this employer, he asked for his payment. He said, I want to go home to my family for the holidays and I need the payment so I can feed them. So the employer said, I'm sorry, but I don't have any money. So the employee said, okay, so pay me with the produce. So the employer said, I don't have any produce to pay you with. So the employee said, okay, give me land. So the employer said, I don't have any land to give you. So the employee said, give me some animals, cattle, sheep, whatever you have. So he says, I don't have any of that. So the employee said, give me at least a pillow and blankets. I have something I can bring home to my family. The employer said, I'm sorry, but I don't have that either. The employee saw he has no choice. He left, said goodbye, and he went home to his family. After the holidays, the employer comes to the employee's house in this other city in Israel, and he comes with him with wagons of food and animals and pillows and blankets and money, comes with tons of stuff. Comes to his employee's house, and they sit down for a big meal, and he gives them all the wagons of food, the produce, the animals, the bedding, everything, gives it to them, pays him for the whole year's work. The employee says, thank you very much. And the employer says, tell me, please, when you asked me for payment and I said I didn't have payment, what were you thinking? So the employee says, I'll tell you the truth. I thought that you probably lent out all your cash. You don't have money because you lent it out to someone needy. And he said, when I told you that I don't have any produce, what were you thinking? He said, I was thinking you probably didn't take out Trumas and Mises. Anytime anyone has any produce, one is responsible to tithe from that produce. You have to give a tithing to the temple, to the poor, there's different tithes. So I thought that you probably didn't tithe it, and a person is not allowed to benefit from the food unless they first tithe from their produce. So he said, I thought you probably didn't tithe it yet, so you can't give it to me. And when you asked for cattle, and I said I didn't have, what were you thinking? He said, I thought you probably dedicated it to the temple. And the employer said, you're 100% right. That's exactly what happened. The money I had promised to others, I didn't have any land, I didn't have any animals, I dedicated everything to the holy temple. And when you came for your payment, I couldn't give it to you because it wasn't mine. I promised it to the holy temple. Once you promise something to God, it takes on a sanctified state. So if you say, for example, even today, if somebody says, I promise I'm going to give charity to the synagogue, $100, let's say, right? That $100 actually has a certain sacredness to it, certain holiness to it, that you can't now use it on your own stuff. You have to really give it. It's a serious thing. Anyway, so he said, all the things that you said were 100% right, and I couldn't give it to you then. But then after you asked for the payment, I felt bad I couldn't give it to you. So I went to, because I made a vow, I went to the sages and asked them to nullify my vow so I can liquidate my things until, I have more to give to the temple. So he nullified my vow, and now I'm coming with all the stuff that you deserve, plus more. And because you judged me favorably, God should bless you with abundance of blessing. Because it takes a lot to judge somebody favorably. If we see somebody doing something, we can have 100 reasons why that person is the biggest who knows what. Every reason we can throw at that person. But to judge someone favorably takes even more courage from within us. And that's what the Mishnah is saying. Judge everybody favorably. This is what the Tzemach Tzedek said. He says, when he talks about the mitzvah to love your fellow as yourself, he says, just as your love for yourself obscures your own failings, so too should your love for your fellow cover up their shortcomings for you. Just as you judge yourself favorably, you should judge them favorably. That's the way it works. And this is what the Mishnah said. Judge every person on the side of merit. Find something positive to say on that person, something meritorious, and you will see how good and how much this will lead you to better stuff, to doing more and to doing better. And this is what the Mishnah says. And this is the answer that this guy, the employer, was so impressed with the sincerity of his employee that here he was starving. He wanted to bring something back to the family. He had every reason to be upset and to curse at this guy. He was his employee. He knew how much money he had. He knew how much land he had, how much animals. He knew all the property. He knew everything. How often do we go into someone's house and know the whole picture, know the whole scoop? Whoa, look at his house, a nice car, nice this, nice that, right? And then we have the whole story in our head. But sometimes it's not the story at all. It's completely false narrative. The only narrative we have to make for ourselves, the Mishnah says, is find favor in that person. Judge that person favorably, and that's going to lead us to good things. With that, we finish tonight's lesson. I want to thank you very much. Have a good week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good seeing everyone, and good at least seeing your name this week. Have a good night.
Are you going to have another set of classes?
Yes, I'm going to start another set of class, God willing. I don't think next week, probably the week after. Yeah. Okay,
I'll
send you all information. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Bye.